Hello, Midnight TCG members. This is Midnight Fox. We're coming to you with our Competitive Edge podcast. We're on our last week of Archetypes, and our last week is over a highly supported Archetype. Has quite a few monsters, some more overlooked than others. So hopefully we'll give you some pointers this week. We're going over Aquas. Got a lot more support that started to hit with Abyss Rising and the Water Structure deck that hit. Before that, they had some great monsters like Mobius and such, but we'll go more into that as we go farther in. But tonight we have Jinzaki recording, and he has a mic tonight, so you have to say hello, even if it's with your voice changer. And we have Ginzo.
Howdy.
And we have Eddie Phoenix.
How do, everybody?
All right. And as we've been doing, tonight we're going to start off with just kind of some meta or staple cards that go into decks. So without going through a bunch of BS, other than the quick explanation of Aquas, we'll start off with our first one. Pretty sure everyone knows this card was limited for forever because when it first released, before all the Synchro and Spamixes in the days of Soul Control, this card was absolutely broken. I'm talking about Treeborn Frog. As long as you don't have a spell and trap zone, this guy's going to keep coming back unless he gets removed from play. Allows you to go for quick tributes. Allows you to have extra material for synchro summons. And now that it's at 3, I'm amazed to not see it see more play. Yes, it has a low attack, but that's what creature swap and enemy controller's for. Give it to your opponent in attack position, and bam boom. Do some damage. And if you're using enemy controller, you can do that in the standby phase, and you still get Treeborn back. And get to steal their monster. Just my thoughts on Treeborn. I think it's a really good card, but if you're running a spell or trap heavy deck, I wouldn't really say that he's going to go into every deck, especially if you're spell and trap heavy. But now that he's at 3, I think he's overlooked a bit. What do you think, Eddie?
With the spell and back row hate that's in the game today, depending on the deck you want to run him in, seeing as how he's a 1-star, and there's not very many really good 1-star XYZs out, he's not going to be useful because most people don't even run monsters for sacrifice anymore. It's just more lines of drop this, special summon this, overlay for this, and then just start, repeat, blather, and rinse.
Well, we have gotten wind that we're going to get Mira the Giant Star and Goldrat, but we'll have to wait to see what kind of impact they make. What's your thoughts, Ginzo?
Treeborn Frog is a great card. It's unfortunate that the game has moved away from him, but just the talking points you mentioned, like the generic creature swap, and then the much more dynamic, in my opinion, is his synergy with enemy controller in the standby phase. Like, it's actually silly how your opponent can invest in their turn to put a decent field on the board, and if you have a single MST and 2 enemy controllers, you can end the game from the work they put in. You know, and that's what he allows you. You know, he also allows you to, you know, for the Monarch decks to put very little investment into pretty dynamic position plays. So it's a great card. The game has moved away from it a little bit, but it doesn't make him any less great, if you know what I mean.
Well, I just pulled these guys up just so I could kind of highlight them real quick. Everybody can make their assumptions after this, but the 1-stars we're actually getting don't seem too horrible. Mira requires 3 level 1 monsters, and if this face-up card on the field would be destroyed, you can detach an Xyz material monster from it instead. And while it's face-up on the field, face-up level 4 or lower monsters you control cannot be destroyed by card effects. So, good way to avoid your Thunder Kings and other required level 4 or lower monsters from being destroyed. And he's a light monster. Low attack, low defense, but he's a 1-star Xyz monster. And then number 50, Gold Rat. Once per turn, you can detach an Xyz material from this card, draw a card, then return a card from your hand to your deck. Maybe not every deck, but I see some Exodia plays coming from this. But that doesn't go along the lines of Aqua, but that's the 2 level 1s we're getting, but they both require 3, so
Well,
who knows?
there's also the Shiny Magician, which I think is probably the best rank 1 because of its more natural cost. You know, where we think of really good monsters from the Ixies, we think of monsters that give us pretty dynamic effects for the investment of 2 monsters. Well, the rank 1s have mostly been 3 level 1 monsters to make it. Shiny Magician only takes 2, has a 2100 defense, and it can protect itself once per turn from being destroyed by battle. And when it's targeted by a spell, trap, or card effect, you can detach a material, negate the activation, and destroy the card. So I think it's a nice card for rank 1. It makes Treeborn relevant again. So I guess there is that sense that we can talk about these Ixies that may not be Aqua, but because he's Aqua, we're definitely going to talk about him. And then if you think about putting Treeborn Frog into like a Piper deck, I mean, it's easy investment. You know, it keeps coming back, so it's never really going to cost you more than you get from it.
I see it now, the Shineat.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, overlooked right now, but I think when we get the Shineat Magician, Mira, and Gold Rat, maybe Treeborn will see a little more play. And then, of course, we know that once we actually do get these good cards, then Konami's going to troll us and say, oh, well, Treeborn's back down to 1. Sorry about your luck.
You never know, right? Right now, though, it's one of those things where Konami is... The card isn't getting much play because of how it's... how the meta is going right now. So I don't know when this new Magician's going to drop right offhand.
I think it's not Cosmo Blazer. I think it's the one after.
Okay, so it'll be in between ban lists, so to speak.
Right after the new ban list hits, right after March.
So possibly in September of this year, we could see it going down to 1. That's if the deck really goes off and that card really starts seeing more fire and more play.
Well,
so,
now we're supposed to get the dark counterpart to Mystic Piper. So...
Really?
I think so, yes. Not Cosmo Blazer, the one after.
I may have to start playing the game a little bit more now.
Don't even have it picked up right in front of me, so I can't remember what the set is, but the dark version of the Piper is supposed to hit in that.
We'll talk about it probably next podcast. Oh yeah, we got a big lineup of stuff coming down, so
Oh yeah, lots of wonderful stuff. But moving on to our next guy, another good guy we looked at is Gen X Undine. When he's normal summon, you can send a water monster from your deck to the graveyard and add a Gen X controller from your deck to your hand. Created a lot of stir with the Gen X decks. He's easily splashed into Frognarks. Not going to say I know a huge amount about Undine, but he's good going into like Gungnir, Sea Lord, Duloran, all of your lower synchros that we're kind of moving away from. But at the same time, they're still broken. Just people have went more to Xyz that they've kind of lost the luster they once had. What about you, Eddie? What do you think of Gen X Undine?
For me, Gen X Undine is a card to where, thanks to Abyss Rising, I found a way to start building around another deck, the deck type for Aqua / Water. Well, the deck mainly going to be Fish, Sea Serpent, and Aqua type monsters because of Rage of the Deep Sea. So I play Gen X Undine. I take Rage of the Deep Sea, ditch him to my graveyard. Depending on how many monsters I have how many Fish, Sea Serpent, or Aqua type monsters I have in my graveyard, I'm gonna take him and bring him back to my side of the field, and have like with Monster Reborn, Call of the Haunted, or possibly just normal summon him from my hand by having a Legendary Ocean on my side of the field.
The one thing I do like about him is he's an easy way to dump Treeborn, and you get a tuner to hand for doing it.
Yeah, that too.
What about you,
Right on.
Genzo? What's your thoughts on Gen X Undine? Genzo, you there?
Don't tell me we lost him again.
I see you.
I think we might have lost him again.
We lost him. Better fix your mic.
Oh, what an idiot. I hit the mute button. I apologize, guys.
And that's the comedy part of the hour.
There you go. No, I was just asking if Eddie was finished. I thought you had a thought you were finishing up.
Nope, at this point I'm just finished. Done. Scoop.
Okay, dope. Well, I have a lot to say about Gen X Undine. It's a card, upon first release, maybe it wasn't totally viewed as an asset to a deck, but since its release up until now, especially with Mermail and Atlanteans, it's just always been there, because at its earliest point, it was running in Gen X Monarch, which was a beautifully efficient deck. It was nice. It really was, because you take Gen X Undine, as you said, send Treeborn to the grave. Now your Monarch plays are set up. Plus you get the level 3 tuner. And the deck did a lot back then, because we still had 3 Formula Synchrons. Most decks were running that were Synchro based. Multiple Librarians. So it offered a lot to that deck. And then as you go on, it's just done the same thing, just made appearances here and there to be kind of like a consistency factor, adding a little bit more consistency than maybe a weaker deck would have had. And then now with Mermail Atlantean, it's just kind of ridiculous. That whole deck in itself is ridiculous, because when has paying a cost, and think about that phrase when you say it, pay a cost. There should be a consequence. You know, I activate Premature Burial, I pay 800 life points. I don't pay 800 life points and draw a card for Premature Burial. There should be no benefit to a cost. And that's what Gen X Undine is doing for the game right now with the Mermail deck. You summon it, you send Dragoons to the graveyard, add controller to your hand, and then Dragoons will let you grab, what, Deep Sea Diva? Or even one of the most effective monsters in the deck being Megalo. So, that's goofy. And then also the last thought about that is, usually when you added Gen X controller to your hand, it sat there. Sure, you may have synchroed at some point, but most of the times it just sat there. Now, a deck where every monster in the deck just about is water, the deck runs Allure of Darkness. just because it can kind of guarantee it's going to see Gen X controller. So
And
it's
good
just
if you
really
don't-
good.
It's good if you don't have what you need in your hand. He's good to send back with Moria of Greed, even if you have to have another card, and he's not useful at the time. You've already got what you need in the graveyard dumped. So, still, yeah, he has plenty of uses. And your comment about premature burial actually made me think of my locals yesterday. So, quick funny story. Playing against a guy, and we know Premature's banned. So the guy's playing me, and he activated the Forceful Sentry. Said, "You realize that's banned?" No. Takes it out and replaces it with Graceful Charity.
Beautiful.
It's like,
I like that guy's thinking.
it was his first tournament, so I was like,
great.
okay, I'm not going to hold it against you. But yeah, these cards are banned, guy.
Like, dude, I don't know how much you've been paying attention, because like when I talk to people down at campus who have said, hey, I've played Yu-Gi-Oh for a while now, and I say, yeah, you realize this card's now banned and that card's now banned, and now that card's limited to this much, and it's like, what, really? What? I didn't know that. I'm like,
Our next guy, Snowman Eater, really saw a lot of popularity when Absolute Zero hit, but any which way it goes around, this guy's good. He's got 1900 defense. His attack does kind of stink. It's a 0, but he's a level 3, so he's Zen Main's food. He's Leviair food, what have you. And when he's flip face up, you get to destroy a face-up monster on the field. So you get destruction, you get a high defense, and if your opponent's playing something low, you're not only going to get that destruction, but possibly the next turn you're going to have that other level 3 that's going to put you into Zen Main's, Leviair, Leviathan, number 30, Acid Golem, what have you, as we see a lot of the power support monsters, I should say, are within the rank 3 Xyz monsters. So, him being at level 3 and having a destruction effect, it's really awesome. And if you're running a water-based deck, he's definitely a good toss-in. And if you're running heroes, I mean, he's good zero food with Miracle Fusion. Just my quick thoughts on Snowman Eater. What about you, Eddie? What's your thoughts on Snowman Eater?
Snowman Eater, you pretty much hit all the points I was going to make. When Absolute Zero did hit, because of it having the Miracle Fusion with a Elemental Hero monster, being able to just ditch it really quick to the out-of-play area and then just summon Ab-Zero, people went gaga for this thing.
Yeah, I remember the price on it skyrocketed for quite a while, and it was just a regular rare when it first released, and it was like $8 to $10.
Yeah.
To get a hold of a rare.
You normally don't see that kind of prices with just rares, but it's one of those things to where when you see it, it's one of those.
What about you, Genzo? What's your thoughts on Snowman Eater?
Great card. I guess the only thing left to mention about him really is, hold on a second. That he's a great side deck card more than anything. You talk about the most versatile cards you can use. While some decks may actually main deck this guy, most decks, especially competitive decks, will just have him in the side deck at 2 or 3 of. It's great against Rabbit. It's obviously great against Thunder King Ryo. So, other than what you guys have already mentioned, that's the only thing really to mention is that this guy, when you're thinking about your side deck, you should be thinking about this guy and making the decision to run him or not.
Alrighty, well, moving on to our next guy. Another staple, Leviair, the Sea Dragon. A lot of people don't realize, because he says Sea Dragon, they probably think it's Sea Serpent or Dragon. He's an Aqua. Rank 3 Xyz, 2 level 3 monsters, and once per turn, you get to detach an Xyz material and bring back a level 4 or lower monster. So, be from your opponent's banished or your own banished. So if you're running a rabbit deck, great abusage of reusing rabbit. Not on the same turn you activated it, of course, but a great way of abusing rabbit, a great way of abusing chaos decks. If you need to get Thunder King back out to limit draw engines, Leviair's your guy. Definitely a staple, definitely a mention, and I don't want to cover everything on it, so with that I'm going to pass it on to Eddie's thoughts.
I have to agree with you there. You're able to take Leviair, drop him to your side of the field, pull a monster that you sent from your out-of-play area, like you've already made mention of Thunder King Ryo, of you could pull back Rescue Rabbit, and quite a few other level 4 monsters to start just that crazy, just fueled synchro power. But I don't want to cover too much, so that way I can at least give Ginzo something to talk about. So, Ginzo, on to you.
We had a conversation on somewhere about if you had to make a decision on what Xyz at this point in the game would be worth banning, what would it be? And the consensus was Leviair. And if you think about it, I know some people feel that you should not have access to the banished area ever, because it kind of defeats the purpose of banishing a card. Yeah, it's not in your hand, it's not on your field, it's not in your deck, it's not in your graveyard. It's banished, it's removed from the game. Why should you have access? And so there's a lot of that thought process that goes into Leviair, because as you guys have mentioned, the ability to get back that rabbit. So like if you open as a rabbit player, Rescue Rabbit and Tour Guide, barring Effect Veiler, you should win that game. Hands down. There should be no reason you don't win that game. Especially if you have 2-3 traps you can set to defend your position. That's just ridiculous. Because not only will you have your first turn Logia, you'll then have Leviair at 1800 body, and then, another Logia or a Dolka, and as we know, the most popular variant of Rabbit right now is Macro Rabbit, so now you have Logia, Leviair, Logia, Dolka, whichever one you choose to go for that second, and then you have Macro. I mean, that's just kind of silly. So, like, I think I agree with those people. If I was put in a position where I had to choose one Xyz monster to ban right now, it would be Leviair. I mean, there are other cards or other Xyz monsters that are really good in certain situations, but Leviair is just so generic. Like even if you don't play Rabbit, you can summon Leviair, and if you bottomless trap hold your opponent is Thunder King Ryo, you could take it and put it to work against them. So it's really good.
Oh, that is just... Here's the thing, I just came up with like so many different ideas now because of just like popping off in my mind with just random deck ideas. Leviair, I think when we start to sit down and talk about the new ban list that's going to come out, I think Leviair, I'm going to go ahead and call this now, I think Leviair is going to be one of those cards that we see thrown onto the limited list.
Yeah, I was going to say limited. I wouldn't say banned, but he's definitely going to get limited.
Here's the problem with that theory, though, that idea. If you think about it, most decks only run one Leviair, so you either leave it at 3 or you ban it, because anything else you're not affecting the playability of the card as it's already currently played. So it either has to stay at 3 or be banned.
And it's, from what I've been seeing on Dueling Network, it's only going to get worse too with the new Harpy Lady support cards that are actually hitting. Thank you, Konami. That it's just been playing stupid. A lot of players have been using the new Harpies. Of course, people are looking forward to both the new Harpies and the Phantom Beast planes. So we'll see how that affects things. And of course, we have to give mention to at least one banned card, as we've been doing. And probably out of the two Aquas that are banned right now, the more overpowered one would be Tribe Infecting Virus. 1600 attack, 1000 defense, level 4. Discard a card from your hand, declare one type of monster, and destroy all face-up monsters of the declared type on the field. Right now would be devastating because a lot of decks like Dino Rabbit and such have went to one specific type of card. So if Konami really wanted to wreck the game, it would be a good card to come back. Of course, you do have your variants like Medolchis and such that run different types within the same deck and wind-ups, but a lot of your top-tier decks run one certain type of monster. So that's my thoughts on Tribe Infecting.
Now, see, for me, I wouldn't mind seeing this card come back to at least one. Because of that, what you just mentioned. Most decks are running one type of monster. And these are the top tier main decks. Having a card like Tribe Infecting Virus come in, there are too many ways for it to be stopped in this day and age. You've got Bottomless Trap Hole. You've got Solemn Judgment. You have Divine Wrath if you want to use it. You've got Starlight Road. I already mentioned Warning.
You said Judgment.
I saw. Oh, I did. I only said Judgment. I thought I said both of them. Excuse me. But you've got so many different ways you can stop this card with, like, Effect Veiler, and then you can kill it on your turn. So really, if Konami wanted to, they could just limit this card to one, and just, you know, go, here you go, guys. Let's see how this plays.
But see, the problem that comes from that is the fact of drawing in to what you need. So you're not always going to get it. It could be a game breaker. What about you, Genzo? What's your thoughts?
It's another card that I've been in some interesting debates with because of the nature of the game at this point. Like Eddie mentioned, you know, everything is kind of archetype driven. Now, you take wind-ups. They're not all the same type. So would it affect them as much as it would affect, say, Inzectors or Mermail? I've heard arguments that this card would not make a difference in the game if it come back. I actually heard a person say that this card could come back to 3 and people would run it in the first month just because it's kind of the exciting new thing like Tsukuyomi. And then I've heard people say, like, I would quit if this come back to the game. My personal opinion is, again, reiterating something that Eddie said, there is so much to combat Tribe Infecting Virus. Could it come back to 3? Of course not. Could it come back to 1? That's the real argument here. Because there's beneficial things about it, like it doesn't activate Dark World effects, thank goodness, because then it could never come back to the game, because Dark World should have never been invented in the first place, like Mermails. But I think it would affect the game, but not as much as some of the old-timers like myself who played at a very high level in this card's heyday. Like, it's not going to affect the game the same way, because of course you have Solemn Judgment, Bottomless Trap Hole, Solemn Warning, Torrential Tribute, Effect Veiler. There is so much you can do to this. But again, if this comes back, it's just another card that reinforces a very degenerate deck, which is Mermail. People say that there's skill in that deck. Let me tell you something. Here is a fact about Yu-Gi-Oh! In any deck in the game, there will be skill. whether it's at 10% or 100%, you can make that decision on your own. No one cares. But Mermail takes very little skill compared
a lot of
to
luck.
other decks. Compared to other decks. Because it rewards you for playing badly. So why would you play well? I like Tribe Infecting Virus. I'm a guy who's like, hey, bring back the ban cards one at a time here and there. I'm cool with it. This is just one that just because that one deck exists, I couldn't be for.
See, the thing is I can also throw that there's another deck that only takes 3 cards to win, and that being Insectors. Because
Yes.
you only need the Hornet, the Dragonfly, and the Centipede, and you're done. That's it.
You don't
That's
even really
another
need
one.
Hornet. You don't need Hornet.
You just need, really, at that point, 2 cards then. You only need 2
You need Centipede. Centipede you need, and then you need either Hornet or Ladybug to get best case scenario things that happen.
And then it's just done. So,
Well-
really, you've got 2 brain dead decks that you could just go, here you go, kid, you can play this, you can play one of these 2 decks and win.
Well, there's probably a lot more than that, but just at different gradations. Because the whole game is like that now.
But of course,
That's off
point.
topic.
your Mermails and Atlanteans being your cheaper as far as price wise, your Insectors are going to be mommy, daddy, go buy it for me.
Okay, anyway.
Anyways, so on to the next part of the podcast, where we go over cards, kind of favorites looking at. Excuse me. For the Fox, my first one would be Evagishki Merogeist. 2 level 4 monsters to Xyz summon him, 2100 attack, 1600 defense. After damage calculation, if it destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can detach an Xyz material monster from the card and shuffle the destroyed monster into the deck instead of sending it to the graveyard. Overlooked right now, but a lot of Water players are starting to take a look at least on Dueling Network, just for the fact of shutting down things like Dandelion, Insectors, Madolches, Sangan, anything that's going to get its effect in the graveyard. But yeah, if you really want to keep it around and make it worthwhile, he's going to be more along the lines in your Water decks that are going to boost his attack more. But one of my favorites that I've been looking at, considering I've been running my Wet Rabbit deck, and it was kind of a toss-up between that and Abyss Dweller, and Abyss Dweller won out eventually, but I have to give mention to Evagishki Merogeist in the Aqua podcast, because as we were talking about, like with Insectors and stuff, the ability to abuse the graveyard, this is a good card to stop your opponent from being able to do that. And his cost of summoning is just 2 level 4 monsters. So that's what a lot of players look for. They look for the easy summon. Some of us love Shockmaster and want to get 3, but your chances of getting to those 3 are pretty slim. Unless you just have a turbo deck or you luck into being able to get 3. So a lot of us really look for the 2 level 4s. So Evagishki Merogeist gets a mention from the Fox as one of his favorites. Either you got any thoughts to add to Merogeist before I move on to the next one?
Nope.
I just want to say one thing real quick. Merogeist is a much better card, in my opinion, than Abyss Dweller. So I'm glad you made a mention of Abyss Dweller so I could point that out. That's it.
I just like Abyss Dweller because my deck runs mainly with boosts, with Gilman, Legendary Ocean, and Abyss Dweller. I just get the added drop an Xyz unit on either turn to negate great card effects that activate in the graveyard.
I
why
totally understand. I totally understand it, but I think as overall cards, Merogeist is much more splashable. Like, you can run Abyss Dweller in any deck, but it's not going to be at its best, so why would you, you know?
Right.
But for a deck like you're talking about that's specifically themed for it, go for it.
Yep. So the Fox's next one, Abyss Soldier. Once per turn, you can discard a water monster to the graveyard or target a card on the field and return it to the hand. So if your opponent, we know that destruction of this and control of the spell and trap zone is pretty easily obtained in today's meta, so a lot of players only play one thing there. Or you could have a face down card or a Spirit Reaper or something that's just blocking your game laying out on there. What I like about Abyss Soldier, other than being an Aqua, is he's 1800 attack. So with Legendary Ocean, and again, going back to Legendary Ocean, Spine Gilman, and Abyss Dweller, just those three cards right there, you have an 1100 boost. So he's a 2900 with Legendary Ocean out, 3-star monster with the ability to return a card to the hand. And if you're running cards like Treeborn and such that's going to give you effects once they hit the graveyard, you're getting rewarded for paying a cost. That's what I really like about Abyss Soldier. He's got a good attack, and if you're running him in the right deck, you're rewarding yourself by playing him. You got any thoughts, Eddie?
I have to agree with you there. With him being able to bounce my opponent's my opponent's like Zenmaines or Spirit Reaper or just anything along those lines to where I can get through to my opponent's life points, always a plus for me. And being able to throw something away into my graveyard like Dandelion, and if I decide to run it in that off-the-wall wacky ball deck, hey.
Zenmaines has been the biggest thing I've seen the usefulness for, because let's face it, the easiest way to get rid of Zenmaines is either to remove it or bounce it with something like Compulsory, Neospatian Grand Mole, Abyss Soldier, anything that bounces it and gets it off the field without destroying it.
Yep.
That's kind of like along the lines of with Black Ship of Corn and its ability to send it instead of destroying it.
Yep.
I'm going to say Zenmaines is probably, to the Fox, even though I play it in my decks just because of how well it plays, one of the most annoying cards in the game right now.
Yeah.
What about you, Genzo? You got any thoughts on Abyss Soldier?
I just want to reiterate something that Eddie mentioned. He brought up the Zenmaines aspect, I guess, and so I like that. The one thing that surprises me about this guy is it will activate the Mermail Atlantean deck effects, but nobody plays it, not even as a one-of, and that's kind of odd to me. Other than that, it's a solid card.
Okay, well, then moving on to my next two. And I hadn't even thought of these guys till we went over the podcast. That's what I really like about these podcasts, is you start looking at cards that you may have overlooked in the past. And actually, one of these cards made my worst card of the week review before, but when you look at the combo together in today's Spam, Xyz, and Synchro summons, these two cards together are absolutely amazing if you're running them in a water deck, and you could support the secondary card. The first one is Numen Erat Testudo. 1800 attack, 0 defense, 5 stars. So if you're playing Legendary Ocean, he's 4 stars, no tribute. Neither player can special summon monsters with 1800 or less attack. So, again, running Gilman, Dweller, and Legendary Ocean, 1100 point boost. So now he's went from 1800 to 2900. And if you're running Legendary Ocean, you never even had to tribute for him. And the other one, which made my worst card of the week review, is Testudo Erat Numen, the counterpart to that. 0 attack, 1800 defense. Neither player can special summon monsters with 1800 or more attack. So if you play these two guys together, you have the ability to control special summons. You can shut down every special summon engine available in the game.
Which is
Of course,
99.9% of the game.
you're going to limit your own field, but really if you're running these guys together and you get out your Abyss Dweller at least before you pop those two out, you can pretty well ensure you have the game. When you're running against 6 Samurais, what kills you? The special summons, Kizan, Shadow of the 6 Samurai, and especially Legendary 6 Samurai Shien, Naturia Beast, Naturia Barkion. That's the beef of that deck. Dark Worlds, being able to bring back Grapha, that's the killer. Running into Malefic Skill Drain, destroying the field spell card Gear Town to summon Gajilton Dragon. Your special summons are really what runs the game. So, giving these things a second glance over, these guys together are actually very amazing. And Testudo Erat Newman is easily searched, whereas the other counterpart isn't. But if you can get both of these guys out, you can lock the field. And if you're running things to boost your deck, it's an absolutely amazing lock. And now, much like Eddie always says, I give him ideas. I got an idea I'm going to run with. But I definitely had to give mention when I went through and took a look back at these guys that with both of them on the field, it's an amazing way to control the game. You guys got thoughts on those two guys?
Nope.
You said if in your little piece there. You said if. That's a big if, because MST is ran at 3. That's an out to the field spell, which is, in my opinion, after looking at these two cards, the kind of thing that solidifies the control. So you have MST without legendary Ocean on the field. Thunder King Ryo runs over both of these guys. It's a very common card. So if I was actually going to say, hey, if you have this idea, run with it, drop the getting the Abyss Dweller out. That's already so much investment, because not only do you need both of these guys, one of which is a tribute, which takes a best case scenario for him to not require investment, and then you add on the field spell as well. That's a lot to do. But I do think it's a neat card interaction. You know, these guys together and what they could possibly, or what kind of problem they could possibly present to an opponent. I just think you'd have to keep the idea reined in and very focused.
Yeah, I think you would have to put out a lot of protection. Definitely Mirror Forces, Dimensional Prisms, Smashing Grounds, ways to keep monsters from being able to destroy them. But when you put the two of them together, you have taken the game back to nothing but normal summons. So it shuts down a lot of the best engines in the game right now.
Fox, you mentioned all those cards, and I'm heartbroken. You didn't mention one of my favorite cards, Wabaku! Because it not only protects your monsters, but it protects your life points too.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There's plenty of protection, but I would honestly say that if you're going to look at running those two cards, you would want to run both of them together, and you would want to run a highly protective deck to keep both of them safe. That's the big thing, to be able to keep out both of them at the same time, because they need each other to synergize to keep control. But if you have the protection to keep them out, this is a game locker, because so many people, it's all about how fast you can go into your Xyz monsters and your synchros and your power monsters and your effects from your Xyz monsters like Zen Mains, Leviair, all that. If you can shut down those engines, I'm really thinking in my mind, what can I throw together that protect just these two cards that would give me a completely broken deck that takes the special summon engine out of the game.
Works.
Well, I'll say this: that Jalgan the Spiritualist will do that a lot better than these guys. But they're not Aqua, so
But they're not Aquas.
yeah, she's not Aqua. There you go.
But, at first glance, I gave Testuda Rotnumen a worst card of the week review. But looking at the synergy between the two in an Aqua deck, these cards are actually not too horrible.
Well, hey, don't second guess yourself. These cards are still pretty horrible, but they could be a fun project deck.
Exactly.
There you go.
With that, I'll pass on to Eddie. He's got
Okie
a card
dokie.
review.
Okie dokie. So for my cards, I decided to go with a lot of really good cards that are some of my. One is definitely my favorite, and then some I've seen play from another friend of mine, and just general ideas I've thrown together with a deck that I will be discussing later when we get to the decks portion. So the first card I'm going to throw out and mention is Amoeba. When the control of this face-up card on the field shifts to your opponent, inflict 2,000 damage to your opponent's life points. This effect can only be used once as long as this card remains face-up on the field. Creature swap with Amoeba, burn your opponent for 2,000. They're already pretty much going to be burning themselves for a lot of damage as is with things like Solemn Warning and Solemn Judgment, or any other effects that may do that within their deck. You're giving them another 2,000 damage, plus whatever damage on top of that you're going to pile on when you hit this Amoeba to put him into your graveyard. I run this in the deck that I'll be discussing later.
And of course, Eddie with his magic cylinders especially loves it.
Oh yeah, that too. Anybody else have anything to say?
No, I think
Nope.
you covered most of the big thing with Amoeba is running it heavy with like creature swap and
Creature swap.
Yeah.
yeah, that's it.
Another card I like throwing in to this discussion is Warrior of Atlantis. I can take this card, discard to the graveyard, add one Legendary Ocean from my deck to my hand. It's a free Aqua drop, so if you're running a pure Aqua deck, you're going to probably throw down Solidarity to go along with it, to just start smacking the crap out of people. Being able to pull this straight to your hand, it allows you to throw down a Legendary Ocean, of course, and again, I'll make mention of the big combo that I have with this in the deck later. Anybody else have anything else to say?
The only thing I really got to
Consistency.
say is I like his attack.
Yeah. 1900 for a 4-star, yeah, that's pretty dang good.
And it adds consistency to the deck that you have him in.
Yeah. King of the Swamp. I cannot tell you how many hero decks I've seen this thing ran in. Because, I activate Polymerization. I discard X hero plus King of the Swamp. I get Y hero. Whatever hero you want it to be. I activate Miracle Fusion. I ditch it and Y hero to throw down, or X hero, and then to throw down Absolute Zero. Or if I need to add Polymerization to my hand, I can just discard this card to the graveyard to add Polymerization, and then just start using Polymerization, and then just with it.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to cover that secondary part. It's got a dual ability.
Yeah. I was getting the main, the main idea out of the way first, so. Another card that I've become a fan of because of it being able to just poke the fuck out of my opponent. You made mention of the combo of a Legendary Ocean, Abyss Soldier, and or not Abyss Dweller, not Abyss Soldier. Abyss Dweller, a Legendary Ocean, and then what was the last card to make it go up to 1100?
Find Gil.
Wetlands? Oh.
Spine Guildman. I have those 3 cards somehow magically on the field. I drop in Drill Barnacle. I'm giving this card a plus 1100 attack, making it a 2-star 1400 attack monster. I direct poke you. I become 2400. I direct poke you. I become 3400. I direct poke you. GG, good sir. It's just so stupid. And then last but not least, my favorite flippin' Aqua monster, because I ran him in my Finding Neos deck, Penguin Soldier.
Yay.
Flip effect monster. Return 2 monster cards on the field to the hand. It's a freaking double compulsory and a monster. And if you're kind of like me and you're that weird duelist where you're able to save that monster on your side of the field with like a Wabaku, or just being able to keep your opponent from attacking you, flip it up. I give you your turn. You go to attack it, I activate Magical Hats. I take 2 cards from my deck, whatever they may be. 2 like magic cards from my deck, whatever they may be. Throw them face down with him, shuffle, 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 and spread and pick. Now, if you hit him, depending on the 2 cards that you picked for your magics, you can add them to your hand by taking and selecting those 2 magic cards. Or you can just free bounce your 2 more monsters on your opponent's side of the field, if they have 2 more monsters to bounce. So, anything else?
Good card. And I like that you mentioned Magical Hats. That's pretty fun.
Yeah, and plus, if you ran him the way that I did in Finding Neos, he's such a good card to just be able to throw out for absolute 0.
Not only that, his effect on its own is pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, just any Ixies monster, any Synchro monster, your opponent invests into the play, and then you just go, no. Haha.
Yeah. Bounce it. Son of a...
What about you, Genzo? Who are your guys?
I'll try to rock this out pretty quickly. First will be Mobius. It was the second Monarch that got released to us, and it was in the first pack of the new advanced format. So it seemed like it could be good, but it took a format, I'd say, to really see any kind of play from the side deck or main deck. Really versatile. Thoughts on it in this format? Starlight Road is a pretty relevant card, in my opinion, and just the fact that Mobius allows you to choose up to 2 spell or trap cards on the field to destroy. That's a good option to have versus, where most of the Monarchs have mandatory effects, So I like that about him. My second card will be Puny Penguin. And the reason why I love this card, and I've loved this card ever since I first saw it on DN months and months before we actually got it in real life, is because of a friend who built a deck called Penguin Hero. And it just runs 3 copies of Nightmare Penguin, 3 copies of Penguin Soldier, and 3 copies of Puny Penguin. And Puny Penguin is a way to recycle your engraved penguins. So it's really good, and then you run those 9 penguins, and then you run a nice kind of stout E-Hero lineup. 3 Neos Alias, Stratos, 2 Bubble Man, and there's your hero aspect. And since they're all water, you know that the deck is really going to push for Ab-Zero, so you get to run 3 Gemini Sparks for the Neos Alias. You get to run 3 Miracle Fusions. There's so much about that deck that is really good.
Don't forget about super polymerization as well.
Sure. there's that. I mean, when I was running that deck, I ran it from the side deck, but you're exactly right. It just opens up the extra deck a lot more. And for my last card, I'll do Swap Frog. I think it's kind of got to be talked about since, you know, it kind of got bumped out of the meta discussion. Great card. Again, it's a way to get your Treeborn Frog in the grave. It's a way to get your Ronin Totem, which is an Aqua, your Dupe Frog, which is an Aqua, your Poison, Draw Frog? Poison Draw Frog,
Yeah.
if you're a Lancer player. So it gives you access to all the frogs, which makes it one of the best overall engines throughout the history of the game. And it's just that card alone. And the fact that he protects himself, you summon him, use his effect, send your frog to the grave, return him to your hand. Then if you're in a dynamic game state, you can make him become dynamic. So you have a Monarch sitting on the field. Let's just say Mobius, since we're talking about Aquas, and you can return the Mobius to your hand, or the Caius, or Ryza. There's just a lot that you could do with this guy, and then you add on the fact that he could make easy rank 2s like Gachi Gachi, Daigusta Phoenix, and Dark Mist. So he's probably, in my opinion, at this point in the game, one of the most dynamic Aquas. So we have to mention him just on that alone.
And as easy to bring him back, he's good to bring back with Leviair. You remove it for Rowan Toden, and then you bring him back with Leviair.
There you go.
Get his effect.
Yeah, exactly. And returning back to your hand.
Abusable. Well,
Exactly.
very well abused. So our next point, of course, going on to decks. Mine is not a heavily go into a million cards deck. It mainly focuses around one monster, and I'm not so sure it would be highly advanced in today's meta, but when it first released was the Dudark OTK deck. Dudark of the Ice Barrier is level 2 tuner, Aqua, 1200 attack, and if the only face-up monsters you control are level 2 or lower monsters, this card can attack your opponent directly. It was a great way to abuse frogs, abuse a legendary ocean to drop levels if you needed that, but mostly you ran wetlands and you ran a draw engine that was kind of along the same lines of Exodia to get into equip spells to just load this guy up for a one-turn kill. So you basically draw through as much as your deck as possible with your draw engine to get your cards like Megamorph. I could probably go into 100 equip spells, but you would basically go into as many equip spells as possible and just poke at your opponent, and you'd have Wetlands out too, which is going to give him a 1200 point boost within itself, so he's at 2400. And then if you were able to get the draws, it was one turn. At the most, anybody I saw who ran this deck, and I ran it myself, if you didn't pull it off in one turn within 3 turns, with the draw engine available within it, with Upstart and Reckless and so on and so forth, almost the same exact cards as you would run in Exodia, it was anywhere from a turn 1 to turn 3 win with a little 1200 2-star direct attacker. So, like I said, not highly, I'm not going to go over 10 million cards within it. The main thing it ran was like Swap Frog, Treeborn Frog, Dudark, and then the rest of it was drawing and equipping. So you could just poke, game. It was just that easy. So with that, we'll go into a more meta one. So I'm going to pass to Genzo first so he can go over Frognarks. And then we'll finish off with Eddie.
All right. Frog Monarch. You just think about that deck, and it's hard to think about that deck, if you know what I mean, because it's had so many different variations. Like we mentioned earlier, just to keep this podcast theme specific, when I was talking about Gen X Undyne and how that in and of itself was a good enough engine to help that deck be a deck. It was Gen X Monarchs. Then you've had Frog Monarchs of many different faces. It's one deck that allows for players to really express their preference, because where you have cards like Dark Dust Spirit, which I think is a pretty good side deck card for the deck. Some people main deck it. Some people main deck it at 2 and 3. To talk about the engine a little bit, we have Swap Frog. Probably the most important card. It's the one card that if you don't see it early enough, you lose the game, because it's that vital. You know, getting that Treeborn Frog in the grave is so important to defending yourself, to making your plays, that I guess we should say Swap Frog and Treeborn Frog are as important, but you would prefer to see Swap Frog. Ronin Totem adds a really dynamic aspect to the deck because it's constant tribute fodder. It's Xyz fodder. You can't synchro with it, but that's okay because you have plenty of other things to do that with. When Fox was mentioning earlier the synergy between Treeborn Frog and enemy controller, that's something you really can't overlook when you're talking about the Frog Monarch variant. Dupe Frog, it's the tutor. You know, it's destroyed, or I think if it's sent to the graveyard, you can add a frog to your hand besides itself. Well, and Frog the Jam, but nobody's talking about him. So, so we have Dupe Frog. You can even mention Poison Draw Frog because, again, the Frog Monarch variants have so many different faces. Now we have Lancer Frogs, which is still a Monarch deck, but you're probably only going to be running triple Caius, but it's still the same kind of engine, the same kind of mentality in that deck. So Swap Frog, Treeborn Frog, Ronin Totem, Dupe Frog, that's a lot of frogs aiming to do one thing, and it's just control your opponent's plays after the fact, or even before the fact with cards like Light and Darkness Dragon. It's not Aqua, but these frogs, which are Aqua, make it very, very relevant to talk about. In the earlier days, before Fishborn Blaster got banned, it made Frog Monarchs ridiculous. Just because they can make Formula Synchron and not only gain advantage from your opponent making plays in general with cards like Soul Exchange, but it also could create its own advantage through its own plays, which it has very little investment into. So, Monarchs...
Substitute, yeah? He's on the ban list.
For a good reason, too.
Oh, yeah, but he's not a part of the Monarch deck. He's his own thing.
I think the big thing as far as consistency wise in that deck, big things right now I think it'd be most useful against, just in my opinion, is for like your Six Samurai and Madolchi, taking control of those decks. So, I mean, if you see a lot of those at locals, that's definitely a good option to look at running is Frognarks.
It's a good deck. It's just unfortunate that, you know, it doesn't get as much attention as it may deserve or warrant because, you know, it's just not that easy, guaranteed kind of win that some of these decks that we have right now kind of can quote unquote guarantee, but it's still a really good deck.
Righty, well, with that, we'll, got any thoughts on Frognarks, Eddie?
Nope.
Well, if so, then, we're going to pass it on to Eddie with his original deck, Banfish.
I didn't call it Banfish originally. The deck was actually called the Fisherman's Keeper. I came up with the deck idea after reading a deck combo idea, or a field combo idea, with the Legendary Fisherman, Macrocosmos, and Gravekeeper Servant. Now, for those who may or may not know what Gravekeeper Servant does, your opponent cannot declare an attack unless they send one card from the top of the deck to the graveyard. Well, because of the wording on that card, comboing it with Macrocosmos, while this face-up card is on the field, any card that is sent to the graveyard is banished instead. What that does to your opponent is it creates a lock to where they cannot attack you. If you've got a card like a Legendary Ocean on the field, you can take Legendary Fisherman and drop him straight from your hand to the field. He goes from a level 4 in your hand to back onto the... When he gets onto the field, he goes back to his level 5. He's also unaffected by spell cards. So if you summon him and you drop a Dark Hole, your opponent is sitting there going, what? Because everything on the field has been destroyed but him. He also cannot be selected as an attack target. Now, that little effect right there, opponents forget to read. Because while he's sitting on the field, you can direct attack as long as you have a Legendary Ocean face up. But opponents forget that little effect of your opponent cannot select this card as an attack target. So they just sit there and go, well, I can't attack you, so I'm just going to sit here and end my turn. I'm just like, okay, I attack your monster and I just sit here. Plus, because of being able to target and bring forth a Legendary Ocean to your hand with Warrior of Atlantis, being able to have other cards that'll form around it, like Amphibious Burgroth MK3 with a Legendary Ocean, because as long as Umi's face up on the field, I can attack your life points directly for 1700 and just keep attacking. And I've got the Fisherman on my side of the field. If I want to be a really big douchebag about it, and I don't have my lock, the 2 cards extra that lock you down, I can throw out Pixie Ring and just go, you can't hit me, bro. Because you can't hit my lowest attack monster, and since, my Fisherman's up on the field, you can't hit him either. So it's just... And of course, you throw in things like Deep Sea Diva, or just other cards that will throw into the support of the water monsters. It was just... It's an annoying thing to run, because also you've got Amoeba, which I can throw down, and then use Creature Swap and just go, well, I take your high-powered monster, you take this little monster, and I just dunk, 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 dunk. But, anyway, I'm done rambling. I've got to get to bed.
Well, well, I guess that kind of finishes up this week and finishes off Aquan, our archetype discussion. So next week we'll come up with a nice surprise. I'm sure Eddie's looking forward to Thursday now in the Flash tournament.
Oh yeah, I've already got my deck built. It's a troll.
You never know what kind of twist the Fox will throw in.
I know, that's the best part.
But, so yeah, that last thing I want to mention, if you're just starting to tune into these, take a look back through them. We've covered every archetype throughout the entire game. So if you want a little more information on archetypes, definitely take a look through them. Tune in for our Flash tournaments. There's lots of contests going on. We have our Flash tournaments. We have a referral contest for an Exodia mat. And pretty soon here, after the new ban list hits, we're going to be having a tri-site tournament between ourselves, Yu-Gi-Oh! Forums, and ETC Forums. And if you become a member of all three sites, you get put in on a raffle. One of the prizes is going to be an Inzektor Gigamandus playmat. The other prize will be a Calcujotter. And we're working on a little more prize support, possibly the latest 10s. Just want to make sure that we get that in print, in writing, that those are definitely on board. I'm possibly thinking of going ahead and just picking those up myself, but if the other guys aren't on board. But yeah, definitely keep tuning in, keep bringing your friends. Hey, we give you the chance to win free stuff. We give you a pretty troll-free environment. So without further ado, I guess that's the end of tonight's Midnight TCG Competitive Edge podcast.